Donna Noble is returning to Doctor Who for the show's 60th anniversary this year. But which other new series companions could be back for the 60th or beyond? Today we're going to be going through every single new series companion, looking at where we left things with them and the chances of them returning in the future. So first up we have Billie Piper as Rose Tyler, obviously a very important character, the very first companion of revived Doctor Who. She was kind of there front and centre for those first two seasons, and then even after she'd left, her presence was very much felt, in Runaway Bride, in Series 3, and then before you knew it, she was back again in Series 4. Obviously, the circumstances of Rose's exit, do in theory make it difficult for her to return in the future. Although we've seen them get around that once already in Series 4, but then the kind of status quo was restored. She was put back in her parallel universe, presumably forever. Also with a more kind of definitive ending. She was put there with the Meta-Crisis Doctor, and the idea was for them to kind of go off and have a life, have a family, whatever. But that didn't stop Billie Piper coming back in another form for the 50th anniversary special, The Day of the Doctor, albeit not as Rose, but as the sort of personification or the interface of the moment. There's a couple of interesting things Billie Piper has said recently in interviews, both concerning that sort of second ending for Rose with the Meta-Crisis Doctor, and also that the chances of her returning to Doctor Who in the future. So regarding the Meta-Crisis Doctor and that second ending she got in Journey's End, she said actually that wasn't something that she was particularly pleased with or happy about. I think she was sort of being lighthearted in the interview. I think it was like a question saying, what ending or what moment for one of your characters would you go back and change if you could? And she said that. Maybe it was just the first thing she brought to mind. Maybe she's had an axe to grind for all these years, But no, she was fairly kind of jovial about it and sort of saying, I don't have anything against Rusty Davies. I just think that, it was a bit rubbish to be given the sort of alternative Doctor or the fake Doctor, a copy of the Doctor, rather than the real thing. So yeah, there's that. And then I think in another interview, someone had asked her about the chances of her coming back to Doctor Who anytime soon, and she was very candid and frank about it and said, look, I live in London. If they wanted to come and film me in London for a few days or whatever, or weeks or months, I would happily do that. So basically, if they worked to her terms, she wasn't being a dick about it or anything. She was just kind of saying, that's where I'm at, if it was an easy work to do, if it wasn't kind of involving travelling or anything, or having to spend months down in Cardiff, it was just kind of a brief one-off stint in London or whatever, then she would in theory do it. So, it's not totally impossible for Rose to come back, certainly from the behind-the-scenes perspective, I guess. In universe, it's a bit different, but then again, Rose is such an important character, like I say. I'm sure if they wanted to bring her back, they could find a way of doing it. Whether that they should do that or not is another question, I guess, because, like I say, Rose or Billie Piper herself has had two kind of big returns since her actual time in Doctor Who. So it's one of those things where, I'm not particularly sure that there's anything more to do with Rose, but at the same time, it would be nice to see her again, to see Billie Piper again, just for the sake of nostalgia, really. She was an important character to a lot of those early viewers, and especially now with Rusty Davies back at the helm of the show as well. Obviously the man who oversaw Doctor Who's return to TV and invented the character of Rose, she's his baby, so it would make sense if he brought her back in some way, assuming the logistics and everything worked out. But I'm personally not holding out a lot of hope for this. I think she will return to Doctor Who one day at some point down the line, but possibly not at this particular moment. But, who knows? So next up, in terms of main companions, we have Freema Agyeman as Martha Jones, who obviously played the character in Series 3, she came back in Series 4, and then we last saw her briefly in Inner Time Part 2 as part of the 10th Doctor's sort of farewell tour. She was married to a man who we won't name, who she's presumably now divorced in universe, and fighting Sontarans and being a freedom fighter and doing all this kind of cool alien hunting type stuff, following of course a stint in units as a medical officer or something along those lines. So yeah, I think Freema Agyeman and Martha Jones, the character of Martha Jones, is possibly the most wanted companion return in terms of fan consensus and stuff, just because, again, she was one of those early companions, only the second main companion of the revived era, so this is going, quite a way back to those foundational years of the show in terms of the revived era at least. And yeah, she only had one season. She did appear, like I say, after that in a sort of supporting role for a couple of episodes. But yeah, I just think that a lot of people want to see her again. A lot of people want to kind of check in with her, see where she's at, and I think particularly because of the way that relationship between Martha and the Doctor was written in Series 3, which, was the way it was. I don't have a problem with it myself necessarily, in terms of the Doctor kind of moping around and ignoring Martha, ignoring her advances or whatever. I don't have a problem with that myself. It's nice kind of dramatic writing there, with the whole Rose thing. But at the same time, it would be nice to see the two of them just having a little bit more of a traditional kind of Doctor-companion relationship, I suppose, and being a bit more at ease with each other. Martha presumably wouldn't fancy the Doctor anymore. She's moved on. The Doctor has moved on from Rose and all that moping, so, wouldn't be doing any of that sort of stuff anymore. And I guess we got a glimpse of what that would look like kind of in Series 4. But particularly in an episode like The Doctor's Daughter, she's split up from the Doctor and Donna as well. They don't get to share a lot of screen time together. And of course, that is still David Tennant. It would be nice to see her alongside a different Doctor, I think. Particularly alongside Ncuti. I think that would be a really nice thing to do. And a really nice to kind of check in with, one of those early companions. The earliest surviving companion in universe from the new series that is, presumably still alive and well on Earth and doing her thing. She'd be a fantastic character, to bring back into the show, or even to kind of put in a spin-off as well, potentially, if there are going to be spin-offs going forward. Assuming Freeman was up for it, I think in the past she has said that she would be up for returning, but in the intervening years she's been doing stuff in the US, she's been busy with other shows, other projects, so it would depend once again on the logistics and if they could make it work, I suppose. But yeah, I think it'd be a really, really great one to see. I think it'd be a lovely way of kind of harking back to those initial foundational years of the revived era and checking in with an old companion. We then have Catherine Tate as Donna Noble. We know she's coming back in the 60th special, so I won't dwell on that here. That's basically it then for all three of the main RTD1 era companions. So let's move into the Moffat era. So first up, we have the 11th Doctor's first two companions, Amy Pond and Rory Williams, played by Karen Gillan and Arthur Darvill, respectively. Now, Arthur Darvill is someone that I've not heard loads about recently. I don't know quite what he's doing these days. I know he did Broadchurch and stuff, but that was even now, 5+ years ago. Karen Gillan's gone and done all the Marvel stuff, obviously, and I believe has made quite a career for herself as a writer-director, possibly, as well, doing short films. So she's a pretty big talent these days, quite in demand and doing lots of big movies and things and other kind of things beyond acting, but I think she has expressed interest in returning to Doctor Who, especially if it was just the three of them again, so Matt Smith, Karen Gillan and Arthur Darvill just larking about, like old times on set, kind of being silly and stuff and messing around and having that old dynamic back. And I think a lot of fans, once again, would love to see that because, the Matt Smith era, Series 5 was now over a decade ago. People that were kids back then are now adults. I'm a case in point. And yeah, I think the kind of nostalgia thing would be really great to tap into there, with nostalgia for those early Matt Smith years, for that era, for these companions and for that TARDIS team. Once again, there's the issue of logistics, with Karen doing, I think, a lot of work in America, like I say, particularly, and yeah, as well, with the kind of the ending that those characters got, like with Rose, it was pretty definitive, so it would be tricky to kind of undo that, to get around that, to bring them back alongside Ncuti, say. But I suppose if it was like a multi-Doctor story setup, where there was a story or a strand of story set within, the early Matt Smith era, with the 11th Doctor and stuff, that would be really lovely to see, and I think that could work really nicely. So it's less kind of possible for them to kind of return alongside the current Doctor, the incumbent Doctor, possibly even more so than Rose, really, because at least Rose is still out there. These two have basically died now, so it's a little bit difficult to kind of backtrack from that. But certainly if there was a way of doing it, I don't know, if there was a way of having them back in a similar way to how Billy Piper came back as the Moments, or even like the Guardians of the Edge, or just some other way of doing it, or like a charity special, I'm sure they would be very, very grateful, and fans would too, for the opportunity to kind of get that TARDIS team back together and to hark back to the early Matt Smith years. We then have Jenna Coleman as Clara Oswald. So once again, quite a long-serving companion. She was in, Series 7 8 and 9. She spanned the 11th and 12th Doctors. And yeah, Jenna herself, has done a lot of work since, such as the Victoria show that was on ITV. She's doing some stuff in the West End, I believe, at the moment. There was a show a couple of years back called The Cry, where she played like the mother of a child who died. So yeah, she's done a lot of work since. I don't know whether she's kind of got loads of big projects these days, really. I mean, the Victoria stuff has kind of died down. Not quite sure where she's at with all that kind of stuff, or where she's at with Doctor Who, really, more generally. I'm pretty sure I've heard in the past that she's had some like bad experiences at conventions and stuff, so I hope, she's not kind of turned her back on Doctor Who. That would be quite sad if that had happened. But yeah, it's an interesting one with her and with the other companions we're going to go on to, from this point onwards, really, because it was fairly recent. I mean, then again, it's like nearly a decade now since she actually made her debut in the show, or even over a decade if you count Son of the Daleks, which is mad. In fact, I guess it was like, 8 years now coming up to that she actually left in Face the Raven, so I suppose it has actually been quite a long time. It just feels quite recent, with the Capaldi era and stuff. Yeah, I don't know, I think, once again, I think she will return at some point, much like Billie Piper and Freema to some extent as well. I think it's quite likely that, she might do like a Elizabeth Slade and kind of appear in the show once again, many years on from her original stint in Doctor Who, as like an older companion or something. That would be nice to see. Logistics-wise, in terms of the in-universe stuff, yes, I guess, she has basically died, although she kind of goes off in the TARDIS as well. It's a bit of a grey area there, so that could make things a little bit difficult, a little bit tricky. But I think if nothing else, she will end up doing like a big Finish box set one day alongside Maisie Williams. It'll be the two of them in the TARDIS, for better or for worse, going on adventures. But yeah, I like Jenna, I like Clara, so I do hope that she can come back to the show at some point in the future. I hope she's still on board with it. I haven't heard anything in particular either way. But yeah, it would be nice to see her again. Once again, to see her alongside like Capaldi, particularly, I think would be really, really nice, like in a multi-Doctor story sort of setting. So we can cross our fingers for that, but perhaps not immediately, because it's still relatively recent, even though she left like 8 years ago now. It still feels quite recent, it was only 1 or 2 eras ago, and so I do think that more time needs to pass perhaps before we bring characters, like Clara back into the show. Next, we have Pearl Mackie as Bill, so the final companion for the 12th Doctor for the Moffat era. And yeah, once again, she's expressed, I think, quite a lot of willingness to kind of return to Doctor Who at some points in the future. I think she loved her time on the show. Obviously it was early on in her career. It kind of was responsible, really, for kind of making her a bit more of a name, I suppose. So I think she's quite grateful to Doctor Who and has fond memories, certainly of working with Peter and also with Matt Lucas as Nardole, who himself could return, I suppose, in some form. I mean, it's a bit difficult for both of them, really, because they both sort of died. Nardole, we didn't see him die, but he went off basically to the death, to go and die bravely in battle with the Cybermen. But then as well with Bill, she was converted into a Cyberman herself, but then she sort of got that extra lease of life at the end and kind of became like a sentient oil creature or something like that, whatever that thing was from the pilot that took over her. So yeah, I guess like she's just out there, literally. In fact, she came back for that lockdown thing, didn't she? Doing a little monologue type thing about where she was at, and she was very much still out there, like literally in the ether, as like, oil or dust or particles or whatever she is. So yeah, I think she can return, to be honest. We sort of got her returning in Twice Upon a Time, but it wasn't like a fully fledged thing. So yeah, I think with her, it would be, again, lovely to see her once a bit more time has passed, because once again, although 6 years have passed now since she actually appeared in the show, it still feels relatively recent. But certainly I do think that she will appear again. I don't think we've seen the last of Pearl Mackie, of Bill, and I think she would work really well either with other Doctors or in a multi-Doctor story setting, back alongside Capaldi. So I do think she'll appear at some point, somewhere down the line, but perhaps not straight away. And that brings us up to date with the sort of quartet of 13th Doctor era companions. So first of all, we have the two showbiz gents, the two kind of middle-aged men, Bradley Walsh as Graham and John Bishop as Dan Lewis, and then the two kind of younger ones, so Tosin Cole as Ryan Sinclair and Mandip Gill as Yasmin Khan. So with all four of these, once again, it's very, very recent right now. I would not expect any of them to return to the show anytime soon, but I do think that, certainly at least one or two of them will reappear in some form at some point. It's bound to happen, frankly. I think they're kind of the least likely to return. Well, I suppose you sort of proved this so far with the Power of the Doctor, would be Tosin Cole, I guess, kind of rather surprisingly perhaps, but I believe he's gone on to do some pretty big things and kind of is on the cusp of some pretty exciting projects like over in the US or whatever right now as we speak. So yeah, it'll be difficult to kind of pin him down, I suppose, for better or for worse. And then with Bradley Walsh and John Bishop, they're both still relatively busy, and I think there probably have been busier periods in their careers, but they are still both doing stuff. Like Bradley Walsh on The Chase and things. John Bishop, I think, has got like his own evening show now, the John Bishop Show, whatever, like a chat show type thing, and he's doing Panto at the moment with like Ian McKellen. So they're both still doing stuff. I suppose as they get older, I mean, they're already kind of on the older end of the spectrum in terms of new series companions, but yeah, I suppose once they're even older than they currently are, once they're proper old pensions or whatever, they might come back just for the lols, like for a charity thing or whatever. I think that they'd both willingly do it, because I think they both did have genuinely great experiences on Doctor Who, eye-opening experiences, great fun, great friendships made and stuff, with Jodie and Mandip and whatever. So with those two and with Tosin as well, I guess it's just a case of pinning them down, really. But yeah, I wouldn't expect to see them anytime soon. And I guess as well that the thing to kind of consider is that they were such an integral part of the era they appeared in. Would it be strange to see them alongside a Doctor other than Jodie? I think perhaps it would. But with Mandip Gill and with Yaz, on the other hand, I think things are a little bit different. I mean, obviously we had the relationship thing, will they, won't they, with Thasmin. They were very, very close, Yaz and her Doctor. But certainly I do think that Yaz, could return in the future, in a similar way to how people are kind of clamouring for the return of Martha and Freemagiman right now. I think Yaz could perform a similar role, appearing alongside the 18th Doctor or something as a companion, from the past, with experience of the Doctor and alien invasions and stuff. I think with Freema and with Jenna potentially, and then with Mandip as well, those are the three that I can really see kind of performing that sort of Sarah Jane Smith type role, where they come into the show many years later, from their original time in the show. They come back as an older companion to offer advice and experience and stuff, and just generally kind of lark about and check in with those characters. I think it would be really fun to see, but once again, especially with Yaz, it's not something I'm expecting to see for many, many years yet. So I guess in summary then, it's difficult to kind of say which companions are more likely to return, although some of them have expressed their interest more openly than others. And while I do think that some of the more recent companions, may well return a lot further down the line, I don't think that'll be anytime soon. I think at this particular moment in time, there are probably two companions really that the fans are clamouring to see. So namely Martha, Freemagiman, and Amy, Karen Gillan. Whether those two will return or not is another question, but I think, enough time has passed for those two, for it to be properly nostalgic, properly worthwhile, and enough of an event as well. I think Freema would be the number one choice for a lot of people, do a kind of school reunion type story with her in the new era, or with the 16th Doctor or whatever. Just have her back as Martha, check in with that character. It would be really, really brilliant to see. And then I think with Amy, and to some extent the companions that kind of come after her as well, it would be nice to see them back, but you're kind of more restricted in what you can do. Martha really is the only companion who's still alive and out there on Earth, like Ace and Tegan were, for Power of the Doctor, in terms of new series companions at least. I think if they did bring back Amy, it would probably have to be alongside, Matt Smith and possibly Arthur Darvill as well. I just see that, kind of being more of an option really than kind of undoing everything with her death and kind of getting around that, and particularly because those three were so close on screen as well. I can't quite see Amy working with another Doctor, but I guess you never know. But those are my thoughts on the new series companions and which of them could return. Which new series companion do you most want to see back in Doctor Who? Be sure to let me know down in the comments. And do let me know as well whether you'd like to see a sequel video to this one about which classic series companions could return. If you have enjoyed this video, please do leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more stuff like this in the future. But otherwise, until the next one, thank you so much for watching, and goodbye for now.